How far would you go to see snow on Christmas Day? Lapland? Reykjavik? Toronto maybe? How about Antarctica? And what if I said, not only would you see a white Christmas, but that you'd spend 16 hours a day man-hauling a sled in some of the most inhospitable weather conditions on Earth? In fact, you would have skied the equivalent of Paris to Rome or New York to Chicago. Oh, and you wouldn't see a soul for the best part of a month. You still fancy a white Christmas? In this podcast, I want you to meet a man who is spending this Christmas just like that. Meet Richard. He's a fairly extraordinary guy. Richard used to play professional rugby. In fact, he played for Wales, but since his career ended prematurely, he's reinvented himself into an extreme athlete. In other words, he seeks out challenges that maybe you or I would think, nah. You'll find Richard in the record books. He is the first ever person to climb the highest mountain on each of the world's 7 continents, which of course includes Mount Everest, and stand on the North and South Poles all within the same calendar year.
Put this feeling into words.
He's also the fastest Briton in history and the first Welshman to ski solo, unsupported and unassisted from the coast of Antarctica to the South Pole. In over 100 years of polar exploration at the bottom of the world, Richard is only one of 2 people to complete this incredible 715-mile journey in under 30 days. And now he's going to do it all again. Right now, Richard is on his way to Antarctica for the 4th time in his life. And over the next few weeks, he's going to attempt to ski from coast to pole as fast as humanly possible. We're going to follow his journey, capture the highs and the lows, the peaks and the crevasses. We'll speak to Richard to understand what's driving his latest mission and spend time with the people who have made this latest world-leading expedition possible. This is Richard's story. This is Richard Park's Antarctica. Hello, I'm Vicki Blight, and it's my job, well, pleasure actually, it's an honour. I'm really excited about this, to over the course of this series introduce you to Richard, his family, and update you on the progress of this huge challenge. You'll find out how Richard is doing pretty much when we do, plus I'm also going to introduce you to the team that has got him here, the people that Richard calls Team Quest. This expedition is going to be used to provide learning opportunities for everyone, from school children to business leaders. So we're going to tell you Richard's story through their eyes too, because they're all quite big Richard fans.
He's a really emphatically proud Welshman.
Jo, Richard's fiancée and project manager.
And that means that he really wants to leave Wales better.
Well, he's an easy person to meet and get to know, isn't he? Because he's very friendly and outgoing, and he's got a big personality.
Steve Jones, Antarctic expedition guru.
He's so incredibly positive and enthusiastic and outgoing and good-natured.
He's got an inbuilt love of speed.
Derek, Richard's dad.
He started off with a pony, which didn't go fast enough for him. He then progressed to a motorbike, which again didn't go fast enough for him. He got involved in rugby, and he had to get to the top, and he achieved his desire to get to the top. When that was taken away from him, he had the ability and the strength of character to find another course.
Every time he says he's going to do something, I take a breath.
Nicola Phillips, Richard's performance coach.
I never say, oh no, you can't do that, because that just isn't in Richard's psyche.
Richard was born in Pontypridd to Jamaican-born mum Lee and Welsh-born father Derek. Richard has 2 brothers and 2 sisters and an extended family in South Wales. The first thing you notice when you go into Richard's parents' house is the pride in what he's achieved. There are photos of their son everywhere. Richard on expedition, Richard in a Welsh cap, Richard hosting Harry and Meghan at Cardiff Castle earlier this year, and a very young Richard proudly holding on to a motocross bike, very much a first love.
I started racing motorbikes at the age of 6, and that was a really, really powerful part of my development. I mean, the fondest years of my childhood, easily, and I still love motorbikes to this day.
We've been catching up with Richard in the weeks leading up to his Antarctica expedition, and we got a glimpse of this first love during an interview down the line from Punta Arenas in Chile, Richard's last taste of civilization before stepping onto the ice.
To do it safely. Yeah, that's a motorbike outside of my window.
You tempted?
Yeah, always am. Always am. It was the sort of mental wrestle with the performance of racing motorbikes, being scared but having to manage those emotions and learning skills and developing and then being part of a team, and that team was my family.
And every time he got on the bike, he fell off.
This is Richard's dad, Derek. Occasionally here, you'll hear Mum Lee.
So I looked around for some training for him, and I didn't realise what I was looking at, but I came across this training school in Hereford, just on the edge of the motorway in Hereford. And I rang them up. Could you take a 7-year-old boy? They said, well, he's a bit young, but providing he stay on the bike, we'll train him. So we said to Richard, do you want to go away for a week's course to learn how to ride the bike properly? Yep.
So they jumped into a van, they dropped Richard off at the camp, and when Lee and Derek picked him up at the end of the week, they had a bit of a shock at what awaited them.
And I've never seen such a dangerous course in all my life. It was around the edge of a quarry, and on one drop there was a drop from the top to the bottom with a vertical incline which is almost vertical. And it must have been 50 metres high, this drop. The course went round, up the top of the quarry, down this drop, round. And I said to the instructor, Richard's not going down there. He said, oh, he is. No. I said, he is. Richard got in the bike, go round to the top, paused at the top, and I closed my eyes, and he opened the throttle, and he drove over the edge straight down. And the secret of keeping in about the bike is to open that throttle up. No, I can't think of anything more contrary to self-survival than not opening that throttle up and letting myself fall. But that, with the determination, that demonstrated very early on that he was determined to do whatever we set him.
The parks found sponsorship for Richard's motocross pursuit, but when that ran out, so did the ability to travel around the country and race. So at the age of 11, his attention turned to rugby. Richard, of course, was good at it, and soon enough the family went with him everywhere.
First ever game for Newport Youth, we were playing up at Crumlin, and it was a big local derby, and anyway, halfway through the first half, a massive fight kicks off. It was epic. It was like the OK Corral. It was wild, and I'm in the middle of the pitch and just trying to stay upright and trying to pick the right colour jerseys off, and I look around and I literally, I'm not joking, I look over my shoulder and Mum is like a metre away from me, and I thought, what are you doing? What? And somehow Mum had gone from the touchline and she got in the middle of this like massive scrap, and Dad's trying to pull her back, and it was, this is not, for anyone that knows my mum, Mum, you used to be a magistrate, and just maybe people would just think I'm talking about a different person, but yeah, we've always been a really tight family.
And you've heard about Groggin Welsh players, have you?
Yes.
Richard Grogg, only one ever made in each of his teams he played for.
Richard stepped up from youth grade to the senior team at his hometown club Newport before then moving to play in the town of his birth, Pontypridd. This was the first time he met Nicola Phillips, the person who has got Richard in tip-top condition for all his recent expeditions. So, could she spot his future talent a mile off?
Hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it? So if I, hand on heart, wouldn't have been able to say that those attributes stood out at the time. But he was obviously an incredibly talented athlete and a very athletic rugby player. But he was also somebody that you could have a really in-depth, insightful conversation about quite a wide variety of topics outside of his sport, which I suppose, looking back, shows that the combination of that awareness, that articulateness.
Whilst world record expeditions were still a way off, a treasured Wales cap was just around the corner. On the 8th of June 2002, at the Free State Stadium, Bloemfontein, Richard won his first cap for Wales against South Africa. A proud moment for two people in the ground that day, Mum Lee and Dad Derek.
To stand in that stadium, to see your son come out on the pitch, he just burst into tears. I held it in most of the time. Lee was sobbing all the time.
I should say that when we talked to them about this moment, it was actually Derek that was welling up. But on we go.
But it was like a lifetime ambition. At that time, we're talking about, 20 years ago, is it now?
Probably.
We had a lot of friends who were rugby inclined, so we were with a lot of friends, and they all felt the same. There was a group of us who were bawling our eyes out like kids.
Richard earned 3 more caps for Wales, but missed out on the final selection for the 2003 Rugby World Cup. That year, he played regional rugby for the Celtic Dragons, a short-lived amalgamation of Pontypridd and Bridgend rugby clubs. Richard went to the north of England to play for Leeds and the south of France to play for Perpignan, before returning to Newport to play for the Dragons, and with the hope of returning to the Welsh side.
And I came back with a bit of a bang. I had a couple of really good games, a couple of man of the matches, and I, certainly the media was starting to remember me, so to speak, and at the time, Paul Turner, who was the coach at the Dragons, was in talks with the national squad, and my name was starting to be talked about again, and that was a really big driver for me, and that's what my focus was. It was all about coming back to Wales to play for Wales again. I always felt that I had unfinished business, and actually, I was holding on too tight at that time, and I started to make some poor decisions with my body, and my shoulder was proved to be catastrophic, because I picked the injury up quite early on in that season, but wanted and chose to play with it and to play through it, and when I went in for the surgery, it was supposed to be a clean out. It was supposed to be a routine surgery. I was hoping to be fit for Europe in 2 or 3 weeks' time, and to come round from that surgery, and then for Jeff Graham, the surgeon, who's a really good friend of mine now, Jeff to say, "You're not going to play again. It's worse than we thought." That was, it's brutal. It was. It's brutal.
Richard was 31 when he was forced to retire from rugby. It hit him hard. He moved back to his parents and spent a long period battling both depression and agoraphobia. In fact, at one point, it took him 3 weeks to leave his parents' spare bedroom. His mum, Lee.
We were there to love him and look after him and provide the comforts of home that he needed at that time, which we did. And that contributed to him getting over it. Had he been left on his own, it might not have been the same story. So I'm quite proud and happy that he was with us and we looked after him to the best of our ability. The sad thing is not knowing how he had or was suffering, because he was very good at hiding it. He never gave us the impression he was really as down as he was. We knew he was upset, and obviously it was a life-changing decision that was made, that he can't play rugby again. And I just thought, people say, he's upset. But he was actually depressed, very depressed at the time.
Richard says it took him 4 years to get over the fact he'd never play rugby again.
I hadn't perceived life after rugby, but there is life after rugby, so that just gave me the courage to start moving again. And at first it was just coming downstairs, then it was eventually getting out of the house and going for a run and getting outside again. And my overriding feeling around that period of my life was just fear of the unknown, fear of the loss of identity. If I wasn't, a rugby player, who was I? What value did I have? Where was my place in this world? And fears of paying the mortgage, all kinds of things. And I think subconsciously I was just tired of being scared. And for me, my way to gain control of that situation was to, I guess, do something that terrified me, and that was climbing.
In Richard's darkest days, a spark was starting to ignite. He was reading Sir Ranulph Fiennes' book Mad, Bad and Dangerous to Know, which made him curious about mountaineering. He started reading of the famous 7 summits and was pointed in the direction of the expedition company Jagged Globe, led by Simon Lowe. Simon and his team helped Richard turn this curiosity into a reality, then a passion, then an obsession, and then to something in 2011 that no one had ever done before.
We then started talking about becoming the first person to climb the highest mountain on each of the world's 7 continents, the 7 summits, and to stand on the North and the South Pole. Nobody had ever attempted it or achieved it in the same calendar year. Many people thought it was impossible, but the team I'd assembled at that point, we had a diversity of thinking that meant we looked at it slightly differently, and actually by doing it in 7 months, by combining some of the climbs in some of the weather windows, meant that it was achievable.
As he'd done with every other aspect of his life, Richard set a steely and brave focus on his new goal.
You know, I used all of my life savings from my career in rugby, the insurance policy that I received with my career-ending injury, to fund over 2 years of training. Of those 2 years, I spent 18 months in a tent, you know, amassing a lifetime of mountaineering skills and experiences necessary to attempt a project like this, and certainly to attempt it with the integrity that was important to me. Sold pretty much everything that I owned. Even tried to sell my house, wasn't able to, so rented it out and moved back in with mum and dad. And I regularly joke about this, but of all the challenges I've had the last 10 years, moving home at 30 was one of the toughest.
And for Derek and Lee, who had seen him race motorbikes at 6 and play rugby at the highest level, Richard's latest challenge was the most stressful to date.
We would lay in bed at night, and I can remember waking up saying, "Are you awake?" And then we'd both get up and come and have a cup of tea 3-4 o'clock in the morning, because we wondered what Rich was doing. And that stayed with us for a long time. In fact, that's one time I lost a lot of weight, because I really couldn't eat and focus. I was that concerned. We had good people around us. I mean, he had an amazing team, but the financial brunt of everything was rested on our shoulders at the end of the day. And maybe that was part of the stress, and worried, was he really going? I felt in my heart of heart he would, because of his determination, but it was unknown. Going up Everest, I mean, nobody goes up Everest first time, sort of thing. And, you know, maybe I didn't speak to Derek, but I had sleepless nights. I think, well, my God, can he do that? But he did.
The 7 highest mountains on each of the world's continents, the 3 poles, north, south, and the summit of Everest, in 6 months and 11 days. Richard Parkes had defied the doubters. He was a Guinness World Record holder. So where did this rank for him? I'll leave it to Steve, the producer, to ask the hard questions.
If you had to keep one, but only one, would you keep that first world record or that first Wales cap?
If I had to pick one, honestly, and it breaks my heart to say this, I would pick the 737 challenge. And the reason why I would pick it is because, each of my projects has had a societal or legacy component to that. And the actual expedition has only been part of the project, none more so than my current project, Team Quest. That has been the culmination of the last decade of trials and errors and failures and learning and finding out really what it is that excites and inspires me. But that ability to add value to the world that we live in, I mean, tangibly, has come in this chapter of my life.
Richard was on top of the world, having set a new benchmark in the climbing of the 7 summits, a legacy which will live on forever. But if there was one part of the globe that stayed with him, it was Antarctica.
It's both brutal and beautiful all in the same moment. And I really mean the same second. You can be genuinely surviving, completely uncomfortable, having to focus every part of your physiology and psychology to put one ski in front of the other, battling a ferocious katabatic headwind, and the light will change, and the crystals in the snow will reflect the light in such a way that it looks like you're floating over a bed of diamonds, and then it'll take that away from you, and it'll go back to being brutal again.
We'll get into the story of Richard's history with Antarctica in episode 3, but all you need to know for now is that this is Richard's 4th visit to the continent and his 3rd solo coast-to-pole expedition. He's currently the fastest Briton to ski solo to the pole and the 2nd fastest in history. Being Richard, he wants to do it even quicker this time. Breaking records is important. Equally as significant are firsts, and for Richard, this expedition is full of them. This will be Richard's first expedition as a dad, and we'll meet little Fred really soon. Another first is leading Team Quest, which is using this expedition to create a series of learning opportunities. So who is Team Quest? That's next time on Richard Park's Antarctica. Thanks for listening. To follow Richard's journey through Antarctica, click subscribe to get regular podcasts for free downloaded to your phone and when they are ready. And if you like what you hear, then why not give us a rating and a review? It'll help other people find the podcast more easily. I'm Vicki Blight. Richard Park's Antarctica is a Bengo Media production for Team Quest.